Were Bronze Age comics weirder than they are now, or is this just some generational perception that we have? Because I'm pretty sure that if you handed someone from the 70s a modern DC comic today, they would be so bewildered as to what was going on. Hey everybody, my name is Jessica. Welcome back to my channel, and today we are continuing on my All Zatanna Appearances series with a blast from the past. Yes, I am very excited about today's comic because it's the first time we're delving into the vintage era of DC Comics. So I have this issue with me today, which is DC Superstars of Magic, Volume 11, and this dates back to January 1977. So it's definitely one of the oldest Zatanna stories out there, though still not the earliest. So a little bit about this comic to start. It is written by Len Wein, or Ween, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce this person's name, and it is drawn by Gray Morrow. So only these two creators are credited as writer and artist, and it's actually a double feature issue featuring a Flash story versus Abracadabra. So the comic has Zatanna's story in the first half and the Flash's story in the second half, but of course we'll only be talking about Zatanna's story today. So as usual, I'll be going through the entire comic page by page so you know exactly what's going on. Don't worry, you won't have to have read this comic to kind of watch this video. That's the whole point of me doing this series. And then at the end of the video, I'll be talking about some of the more interesting aspects of Zatanna's character, the supporting cast that she's surrounded with, and also her powers and her special skill sets that are featured in this particular story. So the comic opens with a scene of Zatara, Zatanna's father, sitting at their mansion Shadowcrest. And we can already see by the ominous thunder and lightning in the background that there are bad omens. Zatara, who has retired from superheroics, is undertaking a personal quest to gain total knowledge of supernatural forces. But this personal quest seems to come with consequences because a bunch of demons suddenly spawn in his house and start attacking him. When we're introduced to Zatanna, we see her practicing her sleight of hand magic tricks in front of her stage manager slash boyfriend at the time, Jeffrey Sloan. He makes a comment about how stage magic isn't as impressive when she can do real magic, but she says, "It's no challenge for me to utilize real magic in my act. Sleight of hand requires effort and practice." She turns the snake into an apple tree for the fun of it, and she makes a joke about turning Jeff into a frog for his witty slash snide comments, but they end up going for coffee instead. And for some reason, going to coffee means that she has to stop by her father to tell him that they're going for coffee. But things take a turn for the weird when her father accuses her of being an accursed witch and spellcast her backwards, using the same backwards magic that she uses, and says, "Zatanna, be gone." Both Zatanna and Jeff get pulled through limbo, while Zatara says, very ominously, "I have done as you commanded, master. They are gone." Now Zatanna and Jeff land into this strange place which Zatanna identifies as a different dimensional world. Unfortunately, she says her father's powers are stronger than hers and that she isn't able to break the spell. So she conjures up this crystal ball to find a dimensional juncture which exists in every world and apparently can help them get home. Zatanna conjures up a flying carpet, which is for some reason green. It kind of looks like a patch of grass, but that's cool. However, as they're flying, a bunch of barbarians start to attack them. Zatanna summons a sword and shield for Jeff, as she casts another spell to turn the ground into quicksand. Despite their best efforts to fight them off, the barbarians defeat them, and it's revealed that they're also working for the same mysterious master that Zatara was speaking to ominously earlier. Zatanna and Jeff are tied up and carried to an ancient city, but before that they're held inside some stone cave. Now we get a first glimpse into the villain of this book inside this cave, a sorcerer named Varnu, king of this domain. He reveals that there is one in your world who wants you disposed of, and has offered me the task. After that, Zatanna is brought to the Tower of the Dead. King Varnu claims that it was given that name by his people, asserting the fact that he's in charge, because no one has ever returned through it alive. I actually spent like 5 minutes trying to look up the Tower of the Dead and see if it's shown up in other DC comics, whether this is like a recurring location and whether this King Varnu character exists. Apparently he does not. This is the only story that he's in. So because King Varnu's only job is to get rid of them, he drops them off at the Tower of the Dead and just leaves them there and says, "This is none of my business now. Bye. Good luck." I'm kidding, he doesn't say any of that, but he just has nothing to do with them after dropping them off at this tower. It was probably pretty presumptuous of King Varnu to do that. My job's done here. So Zatanna then says a spell to untie their ropes and make a torch appear, which means that she's purposely held off on escaping until they reach the tower. Now we start to see why King Varnu thought he had this in a lock, because suddenly an army of the damned appears. They're kind of like these skeletons that have come back to life, a little bit like in Lord of the Rings. But Zatanna summons a battering ram to crush them pretty easily, might I add. And in the middle of the battle, Zatanna realizes that the dimensional juncture is right there in the middle of the castle. How convenient. But unfortunately, a lot is going on here, and another big bad comes in, a Gorgonus this time, which I presume is just a giant version of a Gorgon. It starts to attack Jeff, and Zatanna uses the spell Images Multiply to trick the Gorgonus into falling through the dimensional juncture. And when Zatanna turns back to look at Jeff, the man has unfortunately been turned into stone. I know this is a really serious moment, but I do kind of love how these two panels look like the cover art, front and back, for a really cool album. Zatanna is devastated, but she quickly gets it together, and I like the little narration here that says, "Sobbing that is soon replaced by the courage that betokens her training as mistress of the mystic arts." Zatanna has a lot of nicknames in this book. I list them all here for you to look at, because there are too many for me to go through one by one. So when she stops crying, focuses, tries to get it together, this is my favorite moment, when she casts a spell to command Mystic Hand Appear. And then this giant hand that just appears from the universe picks up Jeff, brings them both through the dimensions, and puts them back home, where Jeff seems to have been returned to his human form. This hand came with no explanation, nothing, and just solves all of their problems like that, which one is pretty impressive. If Zatanna can summon this thing that's pretty much the equivalent of a mystical god. But two, I am under no illusions that this is just a plot device that they used and came up with to wrap things up neatly at the end, which is why I'm assuming it's not going to show up in any other issues, because if she can use it once, then she can probably use it any old time. Now we're getting close to the end, but that doesn't mean that we're getting close to ending all of their problems, because then the demons that attacked her father come to attack her, and Zatanna then uses a spell to conjure up a pair of giant tweezers and a giant sack, and then commanding it to throw the demons into the sack. It's a pretty creative spell, and I honestly love how much fun she has with her magic. She thinks of stuff that isn't the most obvious solution to a problem. So after taking care of the demons, Zatanna teleports them to Zatara, who is responsible for summoning giant monsters to invade the city. Zatanna then begs and pleads for her father to stop, but he seems unable to budge under the spell. Zatanna is forced to command Zatara die. Jeff is shocked that Zatanna would kill her father, and he indeed drops to the ground. And then we're revealed the true villain of the story, Allura, who is described as Zatara's greatest foe, an elemental menace and an elemental fury. She says that the only way for her to exist on Earth was to take over a host's body, so she had taken over Zatara earlier, and for a second, she tries to jump into Zatanna's body instead, but Zatanna quickly zaps her and puts her into a bottle. Our happy ending is then revealed. Zatara's death was only a sleight of hand magic trick. Zatanna injected him with a tranquilizer, and she said that she did not say die backwards. Therefore, it would not have worked as a spell. Her final trick is to spellcast Smoke, take us home for a very happy conclusion. Alright, so hope you enjoyed that little summary of the story. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Was it what you expected? So let's start talking characters now, because I think there's a really interesting supporting cast in this comic, with some mainstays that have remained in Zatanna's canon up until today, and some that we've left behind in the past. So first we have Zatanna's father, who I would consider the most important character in her comic book lore. Now, Zatanna has an extremely close relationship with her father. You can see that she has even followed his exact footsteps in being a superhero magician, which is why she was extremely hurt and in distress when her father was possessed in the story. This is the man who taught her literally everything she knows, which makes it a really interesting source of conflict for her. But I will say that when it comes to Zatanna versus her father, she can always find out ways to outwit him and demonstrate that she's gone beyond the lessons that he's taught her and has kind of applied her own skill sets and her own ways of thinking. Despite the fact that she idolizes him and looks up to him, she doesn't let this love for her father get in the way from doing what's right. And this is what I love about Zatanna's character. Even when she's pleading with him to stop the monster invasion that he's brought upon the city, and she says, "You must stop this madness, father, I beg you, listen to me," she switches gear to a more angry tone. "You're not the man I loved and respected. You've become a power-crazed maniac." And I know that she's halfway acting here because she has a plan, but I believe that those emotions are real. Because as much as she might feel betrayed on a personal level, I feel like she also would not stand for the fact that her father is going against everything that both of them stand for, because they've both made the same commitment to justice and peace. Alright, who here has heard about Jeff? Raise your hand. If you're not raising your hand, then I don't blame you, because I feel like Jeffrey Sloan, who is introduced as Zatanna's stage manager and her boyfriend at the time, is kind of a divisive character. I wouldn't even say divisive, but he's just a character that nobody really remembers or would like to remember in Zatanna's lore. Besides the ethical questions at play as to having your stage manager, who very much looks like an older man at the time, and Zatanna being a more younger, not as seasoned professional as she has grown up to be in later comics. I think the dynamics are a little weird, but for all intents and purposes, Jeff is a nice guy. Really, he seems to genuinely care about Zatanna. He admires the fact that she can do real magic. He's comfortable around her and takes everything weird that happens to them in really good stride. And in a sense, it's pretty fun having Zatanna date a regular civilian, and it does make him a very fun damsel in distress for the most part. He also acts as a source of comedic relief in this story, and I don't know if the jokes do translate to a modern audience. I think it's just the way he's designed. It's a bit too sleazy Hollywood old man for me. He's also very willing to put himself in harm's way to save her, such as when they're fighting off the barbarians and also the Gorgonus. Again, it doesn't often end well, but it's very sweet. Jeff is a stan. And I do think that it is nice that they kind of offset the inherently sus power dynamics by giving Zatanna so much agency and having Jeff be a damsel in distress. So what do we think about Jeff? Should he stay or should he go? Cast your ballot down in the comment section below. Voting closes tonight at midnight, so get going. Now, I also wanted to quickly go through the list of villains that we see in this comic, because like I said, I'm impressed by how much they managed to pack in. I won't go into detail because we went through all of that in the plot earlier, but here we have the demons who attack Zatara, the barbarians, King Varnu, the Army of the Damned, Gorgonus, the kaiju Godzilla monsters on the city, and of course the real puppet master, Allura. Allura is probably the most interesting one here, even though she's only there for like 2 panels. It's funny because at first I was like, oh, Zatanna defeated Allura because Allura underestimated her. But Allura went to all that trouble to get King Varnu to kidnap Zatanna, and put her in the Tower of the Damned. So she clearly did recognize her as somewhat of a threat. I guess the more correct interpretation would be she didn't underestimate Zatanna as a sorceress, but she underestimated Zatanna as like an illusionist and a stage magician. Alright, so finally we're going to be talking about her powers and skills and how she uses them in this comic. Again, some of these I would have discussed in the plot summary bit, but we're just going to go through the different types of magic and the different types of spells that she casts here. So the types of spells that she does most often in this comic is conjuring spells. She loves conjuring things, from the magic carpet to the sword and shield for Jeff, the battering ram, the tweezers, the sacks to put the demons in. She can think of useful things to conjure very quickly, and I actually had a thought that the way she uses her powers here is actually similar to the way Green Lantern uses his powers with his ring, because it relies on willpower and imagination, which Zatanna has in spades. But magic is definitely still cooler than the Green Lantern ring. Apart from conjuring, she also demonstrates the powers to summon other worldly beings, godlike beings, the magical hand. The magical hand is gonna haunt me for days, because now I'm like, what is this thing? Where did it come from? I'm gonna write an email to the writer and ask, what did you have in mind when you came up with this magical hand? Can you please tell me more about it? She also displays an instance of transmutation, a little bit of elemental magic, when she turns the ground into quicksand while fighting off the barbarians. She also does an illusion trick when she tries to fend off the Gorgonus by tricking him into seeing duplicates, multiplies of her. And of course, her most important skill that needs no further explanation at this point is her sleight of hand tricks. So that's it. Overall, this DC Superstars of Magic issue was so much fun. I loved the creativity in it, and I really liked how it was reminiscent of almost an Indiana Jones or like a Tintin story, with the amount of locations, dimensions that she gets teleported into. Most of all, I love how this story showcases her skills with real magic and stage magic. And I'd like to know, have you read any Zatanna comics from this era? If so, which ones, and did you enjoy them? Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you enjoyed this video and if you would like to see more like this one, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!